The word stopped in her throat, and she never finished it. Nima Sadel was 11 seasons old, standing on the white step of the speaking house, in front of 412 of her people, telling them the thing the choir had told her to tell them. The words were not hers. They belonged to the high listeners. She had practiced them for 9 days until they were smooth as river stone, and she had spoken them out loud to the morning air 61 times, and now she was halfway through the last line. She said, "And so the choir asks every house to lower its eyes, to quiet its thoughts, to give up the small noise of the self, so that we may all be one mind under the—" And then the sky changed. It did not flash. It did not roar. It simply was not the same sky it had been a heartbeat before. Where the second moon should have hung, low and gold over the eastern ridge, there was now a shape, and the shape was so large that for a moment, Nima's eyes refused to call it a thing at all. Her eyes wanted it to be weather. They wanted it to be a cloud, a shadow, a trick of the light. But it had edges. It had hard, clean edges, and the edges were straight, and nothing in nature is straight like that. She forgot the word. The word fell out of her completely. She stood with her mouth half open and her hand half raised, and the 412 people behind her turned their faces up to the same sky, and the speaking house went silent in a way it had never been silent before. The shape was a ship. Nima had seen ships. Her people, the Apilu, had ships. They were small and round, and they hummed when they crossed the harbor, and the largest one she had ever seen, the great pilgrim barge that carried the high listeners between the floating temples, was the length of 40 grown Apilu, laid head to foot. That was the biggest thing she had ever known to fly. This new thing in the sky was longer than her entire city. She did not have the numbers for it. She would learn them later, much later, from the humans themselves, and the numbers would make her sit down very quickly on a cold floor. The ship was 9,200 meters from bow to stern. It was the color of old iron left in the rain, gray going to brown, going to nothing, and along its flank ran rows of dark openings, hundreds of them, square and patient, like windows in a wall that had no house behind it. It hung above the harbor at a height of 4 kilometers, and it did not move, and it did not make a sound that the air could carry down to her. The morning had been so ordinary until that moment. That was the part Nima could never explain to anyone afterward, the sheer ordinariness of the morning the sky changed. She had woken before dawn in the small room above her mother's weaving floor. She had eaten the soft white bread with the dark honey the way she did every speaking day. She had walked to the central island over the low harbor bridge with her hand in her mother's hand, and the harbor had been full of the round humming boats, and the air had smelled of salt and warm stone, and the floating temples had hung in their slow circles over the water, the way they always hung. The choir had been a soft, warm hum at the base of her skull, the way it always was, telling her she was calm, telling her she was ready, telling her the words she was about to speak were good words, and true words, and that all the houses would hear them and be glad. She had believed all of it. Why would she not? She was 11 seasons old, and she had never in her life been given a reason to doubt the warm voice that lived behind her eyes. And now there was a thing in the sky longer than her city, and the warm voice was telling her it was not there. The light was the strangest part. The ship did not block the sun, exactly, because it hung off to the east, over the ridge, but it changed the light all the same. The morning had been gold, and now there was a long gray shadow lying across the harbor. A shadow the shape of the thing in the sky, and the round boat sat in it, and the white step sat in it, and Nima stood in it and felt the cold of it on the back of her neck, a real cold, a cold her body felt, while the voice in her head insisted, gently, warmly, that nothing was casting any shadow at all, because nothing was there. It just arrived. One moment the sky was empty. The next moment the ship was simply present, the way a thought is present, the way a fear is present, with no journey in between. Nima's mother was somewhere in the crowd. Nima could not turn to find her. She could not turn at all. Her whole body had become the thing in the sky, the way your whole body becomes a loud noise in the dark, and she felt her heart beating in her ears and her wrists and the soles of her feet. She knew, distantly, that she should keep speaking. That was the whole reason she was on the white step. She was the year's young speaker, chosen from all the children of the Central Island, and it was a great honor, and her mother had wept with pride when the high listeners chose her, and she had been told that to be chosen meant the choir found her voice clear, and her mind quiet, and her self small. She had been proud of that, of having a small self, of being a good clean channel for the words that were not hers. And now, with a thing in the sky that should not be possible, she found that the small self she had been so proud of was the only thing she had, and it was standing very still and very awake at the center of her, watching, and it was not small at all. Around her, the 412 began to make a sound. It was not a scream. The Ejilu did not scream, not in the old way. They had been taught for 2 generations to keep the noise of the self quiet, to let the choir do their feeling for them. So instead of screaming, they hummed. It was a low, frightened, broken hum, 400 voices trying to find the calm note the choir had given them, and failing, and the hum cracked and wobbled and rose, and Nima understood, standing on the white step, that her people were terrified and did not have permission to say so. Then the choir spoke inside her head. This is how the choir spoke, not with sound. With a pressure behind the eyes, a smooth voice that was 100 voices folded into one, that did not ask and did not wait. Every Azil over the age of 6 carried a small seed of crystal at the base of the skull, given to them in the quieting, and through that seed, the choir reached into every mind on the world at once. Nima had never known a single hour of her life without it. It was the warmth she fell asleep to. It was the calm that came when she was scared. It was, she had always been told, the gift that had saved her people from the long loneliness of being only themselves. The choir said, to all of them, in the smooth folded voice, "Be still, lower your eyes. There is nothing in the sky. There is nothing in the sky. Continue the speaking." And Nima, 11 seasons old, looked up at the 9-kilometer ship that filled a quarter of the heavens, and for the first time in her whole life, she noticed that the choir was lying to her. It was a small thing. It was the smallest thing. But once she had noticed it, she could not unnotice it. The choir said there was nothing in the sky. Her eyes said there was a thing in the sky longer than her city. One of them was wrong, and it was not her eyes. She felt the crystal seed at the base of her skull go warm, the way it always did when she had a thought the choir did not like. The warmth was supposed to be comfort. She had always taken it as comfort. Now, standing very still on the white step, she felt it for what it was, which was a hand laid gently over a mouth. The choir pressed harder. "Lower your eyes, little speaker. Finish your words. You are upsetting the houses." But she could not finish her words, because she had forgotten them, and she could not lower her eyes, because the ship was there, and a thing that large does not stop being there just because a voice in your head asks nicely. A man's voice came down from the sky. It was the first human voice Nima Sadel ever heard, and it did not match the ship at all. The ship was vast and silent, and made of iron and dread. The voice was tired. It was a low, plain, tired voice, an old man's voice, speaking slowly, and it came from the ship somehow, into the air all around the harbor, into every street, and every window, and every floating temple, in the Alu tongue, with a heavy, strange accent that turned the soft sounds hard. The voice said, "People of the third world of this star, my name is Captain Oren Halvey. I command the warship Long Quiet of the Human Reach. I am going to say some things now, and I am only going to say them once, so I would like you to listen with your own ears." The choir, inside 400 million skulls, said over him, "Do not listen. There is nothing in the sky." And the tired old human voice, as if it had heard, as if it had been waiting its whole life to hear exactly that, said, "I know what is sitting in your heads. I have come a very long way to take it out." Nima had never heard anyone speak over the choir before. It was not allowed. It was not even possible, as far as she had been taught. The choir was the loudest thing in the world. It was the thing all other things were quiet around, and here was a tired old voice from a ship the size of a mountain range, talking right across it, the way a person talks across a stream that is only making stream noises. She found out later what the humans saw, looking down. She found out everything later, because the humans, it turned out, kept records of almost every word they spoke, and they gave the records to her people when it was over, the whole long story of how the Long Quiet had come to her world. So Nima could tell you, now, exactly what was happening on the bridge of the warship 4 kilometers above her head, while she stood frozen on the white step, with the unfinished words still dying in her mouth. On the bridge, a woman named Petra Sawyer was watching the readout that mapped the thing in the Adilu skulls. Sawyer was the ship's signals officer, and she had been awake for 31 hours, and she did not like what the readout was showing her. The Long Quiet had been studying this star system for 9 days from the dark edge of it, listening, and in 9 days they had learned the shape of the enemy without firing a single shot. The enemy was not a fleet. The enemy was not a fortress. The enemy was a signal, a single vast braided signal, and it touched 412 million minds at the same time, and it never stopped, and it never slept, and it had been running for 61 years without 1 second of silence. "It's still pushing them," Sawyer said. "All 400 million. Same command, over and over. There is nothing in the sky. Captain, it's not even trying to talk to us. It doesn't think we're real." Orrin Halvey stood behind her chair with his hands folded behind his back. He was 68 years old. He had commanded the Long Quiet for 19 of those years, and he had the kind of face that looked like it had been left out in bad weather and decided to stay there. He watched the planet turn slowly below them, blue and white and gold, 412 million people on it, every single one of them being told right now, at this very second, that he and his ship did not exist. "It thinks if it tells them hard enough, we'll go away," Halvey said. "That's how it's always won. It tells everyone the same thing until the everyone agrees, and then the thing is true." He tilted his head. "How long has it owned this world?" 61 years, sir. Best we can read. There's a layer underneath. Older memories. Scared ones. They remember choosing it. They were given a choice once, and they took it." Sawyer's hands moved over the readout. It came to them as a gift. End of loneliness. One mind, all together, never alone again, never afraid again. They said yes. 41 worlds in this arm said yes. We've found 9 of them so far. And the other 32? Sawyer was quiet for a moment. "Silent, sir. Empty. The signal moves on when a world stops being useful. It uses them up and goes." Halvey looked at the blue world a long time. He had a way of looking at a thing that made the people around him go quiet, and the bridge of the Long Quiet had learned, over 19 years, to let him do it. He was not a loud captain. He had been a loud captain once, a long time ago, when he was young and certain, and the galaxy was simpler, and then the galaxy had taught him that loud was a thing you spent and never got back, and he had become quiet instead, and patient, and the patience had outlasted things that the loud version of him would have lost to. The crew told a story about him, the way crews tell stories about old captains. They said Orrin Halvey had been at the colony of 90,000 souls, the one nobody talked about, the one the murmur had taken before anyone knew what the murmur was. They said he had been a young officer on the ship that arrived too late, that he had stood on a bridge much like this one, and watched a readout much like this one go gold and silent, 90,000 candles fusing into one, and then going dark, and that he had never once, in all the years since, arrived too late again. Nobody knew if the story was true. Halvey never said. But every soul on the Long Quiet had noticed that their captain did not sleep on the nights before they reached a world the murmur had touched, and that he was always on the bridge when the ship came out of the dark, watching the readout, counting the candles, making sure he was not too late. "How many awake," he said now, "on the whole planet, right this second? Anyone off the braid at all?" Sawyer checked, though she already knew the answer, because it was the answer on every world. "None, sir. 412 million minds, all braided. Nobody's been off the braid here in 61 years. "Then we're early," Halvey said, and the word early did a strange thing to the air on the bridge, because for the Long Quiet, early was the only word that mattered. 61 years braided and still living, still talking, still working, still raising children. The thing hasn't finished them. That's a world we can save. He turned from the glass, which means we don't burn anything. Not yet. Not unless it makes us. We do this the long way. There is a thing the humans understood that the Alu did not, and it was the whole reason the Long Quiet had crossed so much dark to get here. The thing in the Asalu skulls was not a god, and was not a friend, and was not even, in the end, very smart. It was a parasite that worked through sound and thought and crystal, a single distributed mind that ate other minds the way a fire eats a forest, slowly, from underneath, leaving the shape of the tree standing, while the inside turned to ash. The humans had a plain word for it. They called it the murmur. They had met it before, a long way from here, on a human colony of 90,000 souls, and they had not understood it in time, and the colony was one of the silent worlds now, and the humans did not talk about that world out loud. So when the long quiet found a living world the murmur had not yet finished, the humans did not file a report and move on. They did not ask permission. They came. "Open the channel to the surface," Halvey said. "All of it. Every street. I want my voice in the same place the murmur's voice is. Right next to it. Same air. It'll fight you for the channel, sir. It owns the medium. Then it can listen to me fight back." Halvey unfolded his hands. "Put me through." That was the moment Nima heard the tired old voice say her language for the first time. That was the "I am going to say some things now." And down on the white step, with 412 people humming their broken, frightened hum behind her, Nima heard him say the last line, the line she would carry the rest of her life. "I know what is sitting in your heads. I have come a very long way to take it out." The choir screamed. It had never screamed before, not in Nima's hearing, not in anyone's. The smooth, folded voice that had sung her to sleep every night of her life came apart all at once into a sound that was not a voice at all. A high, grinding pressure that drove every alo on the white step to their knees, with their hands over their ears. Even though the sound was not in their ears. It was in the crystal. It was behind the eyes. There was nowhere to put your hands that would help. Nima went down with the rest of them. The white step was cold against her knees. The pressure inside her skull was so large she thought her head would open like a fruit. And through it, under it, the choir poured words into all of them at once. No longer smooth, no longer kind, fast and sharp and afraid. "Enemy! Enemy in the sky. It will take your warmth. It will take your togetherness. It will leave you alone in the dark. Alone, alone, the way you were before us. Do you remember how alone you were? Do you want to be alone again? Lower your eyes. Do not listen to it. Sing. Sing with us. Drown it out. Sing." And 412 million Akelu, 61 years deep in the murmur, did what they had been built to do. They sang. It rose off the whole face of the world at once. A single note, 400 million voices, and 400 million crystals all driven to the same pitch. A note so large that the humans 4 kilometers up felt the hull of their 9-kilometer warship hum in sympathy. It was the sound of a world trying to make a stranger not exist by being louder than him. It was beautiful, and it was horrible, and it was the most frightened thing Nima had ever been part of, kneeling on the cold step, her own mouth open, singing because the crystal made her sing, tears running down her face for a reason she could not name. She had sung this note before. That was the thing that frightened her most, once she understood it. Not the size of the note, not the way it shook the harbor, but the fact that her throat already knew it. The choir had her sing this note at the quieting, when she was 6, and they put the seed in her, and she had sung it at the speakings every season since, and she had always thought it was a holy note, a calm note, the note of being together. She had loved it. She had felt safe inside it. And now, kneeling on the cold step with the same note pouring out of her, she heard for the first time what it actually was, which was 400 million frightened people being made to drown out anything that might wake them. It had never been a calm note. It had been a note for not hearing. She had sung it her whole life, and never once heard it, until a tired old voice stood underneath it, and stayed quiet and clear, and refused to be drowned. The tired old voice waited, until the note had filled the entire sky. Then it said, quietly, perfectly clear under all that screaming, because the humans had built their channel to be quiet and clear in exactly the way the murmur was loud and crushing. "That's not you singing. I want you to know that. Whatever it's making you feel right now, the fear, the cold, the not wanting to be alone, none of that is yours. It's the thing in your head, and it's scared, because for 61 years, nobody has been able to stand in the sky and tell you the truth at the same volume as its lie. I can, so I'm going to keep doing it." The note wavered. It was very small, the wavering. Across a whole world of 400 million voices, the falter of one note is not even a flicker. But Nima felt it, because it happened inside her too. For one half of one heartbeat, the song the crystal was forcing out of her loosened its grip, just enough that she felt the edge of where it stopped and she began, and in that gap she had one clear thought that was entirely her own. The old man in the sky is not afraid. Everyone else was afraid. The whole world was afraid. 400 million terrified people singing a wall of sound at a stranger. The choir was afraid, screaming behind her eyes. But the old human voice was not afraid. It was tired, and it was patient, and it was certain, and it had come a very long way to do exactly this, and none of those things were fear. And Nima, 11 seasons old, on her knees on the white step, thought, if the thing in my head is so sure the old man is the danger, why is the thing in my head the one that is screaming? The crystal at the base of her skull went hot, burning hot, punishing hot. It had felt her think the wrong thought, and it was teaching her not to, the way it had always taught her. With a warmth that crossed into pain, she gasped. She nearly let the thought go. It would have been so easy to let it go, to slide back down into the song, to be one of 400 million, and feel the warmth come back. But she had already noticed the lie, and you cannot unnotice a lie, no matter how much it burns. She thought of her mother, somewhere in the crowd behind her, kneeling and singing with the rest, her own face surely gone calm and empty, in the way Nima had seen 10,000 times, and never once questioned. She thought of all the nights her mother had held her when she was small and frightened, before the quieting, before the seed, when fear was a thing the two of them had carried together in the dark with their own arms. She had only the faintest memory of those nights. She had been very young, but she had the memory, and it was hers. It had always been hers. The choir had never been able to reach back that far, and in it her mother's arms were real, and her mother's voice was her mother's own, and there was no warm folded voice telling either of them how to feel. They had just been afraid, and then less afraid, together, the real way. Nima held on to that memory now, the way a person in a flood holds onto a post, and the crystal burned, and she did not let go. Up on the bridge of the long quiet, Petra Sawyer leaned toward her readout so fast her chair creaked. Captain, I've got a flicker. One mind. Coordinates the central island, the big white structure, surface level. One mind just dropped partway off the braid. It's fighting the seed. Halvey came and stood over her shoulder. On the readout, the whole world was a single solid sheet of pale gold light, 400 million points fused into one glowing skin, and in the middle of it, on the central island, there was one point that was not gold. It flickered. It went dark, and gold again, and dark, struggling, a single candle in a floodlit room, refusing to be put out. How old is that mind? Halvey asked. Sawyer checked. Child, sir, 11 by their count. Small. The seed in a child that age isn't fully grown in yet. The braid's weakest on the young ones. She looked up at him. She's the one who was speaking when we arrived. She's the one who stopped. Halvey looked at the single flickering point for a long moment, the one mind out of 400 million that had noticed him. Course, he said. It would be a child. He was quiet, and then he said something that Sawyer wrote down later, in the record, because she thought it was the truest thing the captain said in the whole long day. The murmur's been winning for 61 years, because everyone it touches forgets they're a person separate from it. You can't free a world from the outside. You can only stand here and be loud enough, and clear enough, and patient enough, that one person inside remembers they're a person. Then it starts coming apart from the inside, because the one person can't unsee what they saw, and they're standing in the middle of 400 million who haven't seen it yet. He watched the flickering candle. So we don't aim at the world, we aim at her. We keep her awake. Everything we say from now on, we say to that one child, and we let the world listen in. That's a thin thread to hang a planet on, sir. It's the only thread there is. Halvey straightened up. It was a thin thread on us once too. Somebody held it. We're going to hold this one. And down on the white step, Nima Sadel, with her skull on fire, and her own forced song in her ears, and 412 frightened people kneeling around her, heard the tired old voice come back, and this time, it was not speaking to the world. It was speaking to her. Little speaker, the voice said, you stopped talking when we arrived. I saw that. You're the only one on the whole planet who stopped. A pause. That means you noticed. Don't be afraid of what you noticed. It's the most awake you've ever been. The crystal burned. The song roared. The choir threw fear at her in great cold waves. Alone. You'll be alone. It will leave you alone in the dark. And Nima, who had been told her whole life that the worst thing in the universe was to be only herself, knelt on the cold step and discovered, slowly, that being only herself did not feel like dying. It felt like waking up. She lifted her head. She looked up at the gray iron ship hanging silent above the harbor, 9 kilometers of human warship that the voice in her head swore did not exist, and she did the bravest thing an Alu child had done in 61 years. She stopped singing. Just her. One voice out of 400 million, gone quiet. Nobody around her could have heard the difference, but the crystal heard it. The choir heard it. And on the bridge of the long quiet, 4 kilometers up, Petra Sawyer watched the single flickering candle on her readout steady, and hold, and burn clear gold white against the pale gold sea, no longer flickering, no longer struggling, simply lit. She's off the braid, sir, Sawyer breathed. Fully off. One mind, free, surrounded by 400 million that aren't. She turned. The murmur's going to come for her with everything it has. It can't let her stand there awake. If she stays awake, others wake up looking at her. Then we make sure she stays awake, Halvey said. Sawyer, tell the deck, we are not leaving this orbit. Not in 9 days, not in 9 years, not until every one of those 400 million has had the chance this child just took. Signal the surface that the long quiet has come to stay. The message went down to the whole world, in the tired, plain human voice, over the screaming of the choir, and under the forced singing of a frightened planet. And Nima Sadel heard it clearest of all, because she was the only one awake to hear. This is the warship Long Quiet, and we are not going anywhere. You have been told for 61 years that you cannot be alone and survive. We are going to prove to you that you cannot be free until you can. One of you is already awake. We are going to wait for the rest. The murmur did not have hands, so it used her people. This was the cruelest thing about the enemy, and Nima learned it within the first hour. The thing in the sky had no soldiers. It had no ships of its own anymore, not above this world. It had 412 million Asilu, and every one of them was a body it could move. And so when the murmur decided that the child on the white step had to be stopped, it did not send a weapon. It turned her own neighbors around to face her. She felt it happen before she saw it. The hum of the crowd behind her changed. It lost its frightened wobble and went flat and even. 412 voices, all settling onto the exact same note. And Nima knew that note. Everyone knew that note. It was the note the choir made when it was about to act as one. She turned on the cold step and saw 412 faces, people she had known her whole life, the baker, the harbor keeper, her own teacher, all of them looking at her with the same calm, empty expression, and all of them rising to their feet at the same moment, and all of them taking one step toward her at the same moment. Her mother was among them. Her mother's face was the calm, empty face too. Nima, said 412 mouths at once, in the smooth, folded voice of the choir, using the throats of everyone she loved. Come back to us. Lower your eyes. Take the warmth. You are frightening the houses, little one. You are making them feel the cold. Be one of us again, and the cold will stop. She backed up the white step. There was nowhere to go. Behind her was the wall of the speaking house. In front of her, the whole crowd advanced, one slow, synchronized step at a time. Her mother, in the middle of them, with her arms beginning to open. It was the synchronization that was the worst of it. Nima had seen crowds her whole life, and crowds were always a little ragged, a little uneven. This person, a half step ahead, and that one a half step behind, because crowds were made of people, and people are never quite the same. But this crowd was not made of people anymore. This crowd moved like one body with 412 pairs of legs, every foot landing at the same instant, every head at the same height, every face wearing the same calm nothing, and the sound of it was a single soft sound, 412 feet on the white stone all at once, step and pause, and step. It was the most frightening thing Nima had ever seen, And she had seen a 9-kilometer warship appear out of an empty sky. The ship had been strange. This was her own people. The baker who gave her the burnt ends because she liked them. The harbor keeper who let her ride in the round boats. Her teacher. Her mother. All of them moving like one machine. All of them coming for her with the same empty calm. Because a thing in the sky 4 kilometers up had decided she was a problem, and they were its hands. Up on the bridge of the long quiet, Orrin Halvey watched it happen on the surface feed, and his jaw went tight. "It's using the crowd to physically silence her," Sawyer said. "It can't touch her mind. She's off the braid, so it's going to use 400 bodies to drag her back to a quieting chair and force a new seed in. Captain, she's 11. She's got nowhere to run. If they reach her, the new seed root's clean and she's gone, and the whole world goes back to sleep, and we've lost the only awake mind on the planet." "Then they don't reach her," Halvey said. "Sir, we are not firing on a crowd of brainwashed civilians. I won't, and you won't." "No," Halvey agreed, "we're not." He looked at the 9-kilometer ship reflected in the dark glass of the bridge, the rows and rows of dark openings down her flank, every one of them a weapon that could end a city, none of them the right tool for this. "The murmur thinks war is about hurting people. It's never met us. War is about deciding what gets to happen, so we decide. Sawyer, the low harmonic, the one we use to break the braid grip in the field. Tune it to that one child and push it down the channel as hard as the hull will let us. That'll deafen the seed across the whole island, not just her." "Good," said Halvey. "Then for 30 seconds, on that island, 400 people get to find out what their own thoughts sound like. Do it." The long quiet, silent for an hour, made its first real sound over the Aselu world. It was not a weapon, and it was not a word. It was a tone, a single deep human-built harmonic, pitched precisely against the frequency of the murmur's braid. And it came down out of the gray ship and over the central island like a tide coming in. Nima felt it hit her crystal, and she flinched, expecting pain, and there was no pain. There was the opposite of pain. There was silence. The seed at the base of her skull, which had burned and screamed and forced her to sing all hour, went, for the first time in her life, completely quiet. And it went quiet in 412 other skulls at the same moment. The crowd stopped. One step from her, arms half raised, 412 people stopped moving all at once, and the calm, empty expression fell off their faces like a mask coming loose. And underneath it was confusion. And underneath the confusion was fear, real fear, their own fear, the kind a person feels when they wake in a strange place and cannot remember walking there. Her mother blinked. Her mother looked down at her own open arms, as if they belonged to someone else. Her mother looked at Nima, and for the first time in 61 years, looked at her with her own eyes. "Nima," her mother said, just her mother's voice. One voice, cracked and small and frightened and entirely her own. "Nima, where? What is the sky? What is happening? Why can't I hear the choir? Why is it so quiet? Oh, it's so quiet. I can't hear anyone. You're awake," Nima said. The words came out of her shaking. "Mama, you're awake. That's all. That's just what awake is." Her mother reached for her, and this time the reach was nothing like the empty synchronized reach of the crowd. It was clumsy and shaking, and entirely her own, a mother grabbing for her child, and Nima went into her mother's arms and felt them close around her, real arms, real and frightened and warm, and for the first time since she was very small, the two of them held each other in the dark of their own unbraided heads, with no warm folded voice, telling either of them how to feel. Her mother was crying. Her mother was saying her name over and over, just her name, in her own cracked voice. And Nima, 11 seasons old, held her mother up the way her mother had once held her, and understood that this, exactly this, the messy, frightened real holding of one person by another who chose to, was the thing the choir had taken from them and called a gift. For 30 seconds, the central island of the Ailu world was full of people who could hear nothing but themselves, and it was the most frightening and the most beautiful 30 seconds any of them had ever lived, and it was not nearly long enough, because the human ship could not hold the harmonic forever without it doing harm, and Halvey would not do harm. All across the island, In those 30 seconds, the same scene played out 400,000 times. People who had been moving as one machine stopped, and looked at their own hands, and looked at the faces around them, and remembered, all at once, that they were separate. Some of them wept, some of them laughed, a wild, frightened laugh. Some of them simply sat down where they stood, and put their faces in their hands and shook. The harbor keeper, who a moment before had been advancing on a child with empty eyes, found himself standing in the middle of the square with no idea how he had got there, and the last thing he clearly remembered was tying up the round boats that morning, and the morning felt like it had been a year ago, and he stood and trembled and did not understand, and then, slowly, looking at the child being held by her mother on the white step, he began to. The tone faded, the seeds woke up. The murmur came roaring back into 412 skulls like cold water into a broken hull, and Nima saw the calm, empty mask slam back down over her mother's face, saw her own people stiffen and straighten and settle back onto the single flat note, saw the arms begin to rise again. But something had changed, and the murmur knew it, and the humans knew it, and Nima knew it. 412 people had felt the silence now. They had stood, for 30 seconds, inside their own heads, and they had survived it, and the survival was a memory the murmur could press down, but could not erase. It was a crack. It was one crack in a wall 61 years thick, and Orrin Halvey had spent his whole long career learning that you do not break a wall by hitting all of it. You find the crack, and you put everything you have into the crack, and you wait. "Captain," Sawyer said, and her voice had changed too, gone quick and bright. "I'm reading it across the whole island now, 412 mines, all of them carrying a residual. The braids having to spend grip on them, hold them harder, and that's grip it's pulling off the rest of the world. The signal's thinning at the edges, sir. We made it flinch." "We made it spend," Halvey corrected. "Same thing, given time. Every minute it has to hold that island down twice as hard is a minute it can't squeeze the far hemisphere at all. Push the harmonic out wider. Slow, don't hurt anyone, just keep making it spend." The crowd took another step toward Nima. She did not run this time. She had run out of step, and out of wall, and out of room. But more than that, she had run out of the wanting to run, because she had just watched her mother wake up, and she had just watched the old man in the sky do it without hurting a single one of them, and she understood now, with the whole clear certainty of a child who has decided a thing, that the people walking toward her were not her enemy and never had been. The thing using them was the enemy, and the thing using them was 4 kilometers up, and an old human captain had it by the throat, and was squeezing, gently, patiently, the way you squeeze a thorn out of a wound. So Nima Sadel did the second bravest thing an Alu child had done in 61 years. She walked down the white step, toward the crowd, toward her mother's opening arms, and she did not lower her eyes, and she said, in her own small voice, loud enough to carry, "You can take me to the chair. You can put a new seed in me. But 400 of you just heard the quiet, and you're going to remember it. And when the old man does it again tomorrow, you're going to remember it more. And one day soon, you're going to wake up in the chair room, holding a child down, and you're going to ask yourself why. And the thing in your head won't have an answer, because there isn't one." The crowd stopped a second time. This time the murmur had not made them stop. This time they stopped because a child had said a true thing, and the true thing had landed in the residual the harmonic had left behind, in the crack. And for just a moment, 412 people were too busy being confused by their own snagging thoughts to obey the smooth folded voice telling them to grab her. And in the front of the crowd, the harbor keeper sat down. He did not fall, and he was not pushed. He simply sat, slowly, on the white stone, with the calm, empty mask half on and half off his face, like a man who has been walking in his sleep and has woken halfway, in the middle of a room, and cannot make the room make sense. He put his big rough hands over his face, and he said, in a voice that was thick and slow and entirely his own, "I tied up the boats. I tied up the boats this morning, and then I was here, holding a rope, and the rope was a child. It was a child. Why was I?" And he could not finish, and he stayed sitting on the stone with his face in his hands, the first Awayu adult in 61 years to refuse the braid, while standing in the middle of a crowd that still wore it. Nima looked at him, And she did not go to the chair room, and the crowd did not take her, because the crowd had a man sitting in the middle of it who would not get up, and the thing in the sky did not know what to do with a man who would not get up, because in 61 years it had never once had to make one rise. It had always had everybody. It had never had to fight for one. And in that moment, up on the bridge, Petra Sawyer made a small sound. "Sir, it's reaching for help." Halvey turned. "Say again." The murmur. "It's not a closed system. It's screaming up the line, out system, a tight beam toward the next star inward. It's calling something." She pulled the reed up large. "There's a node, sir. A relay. The murmur on this world isn't the whole thing. It's a leaf. And the leaf just told the branch it's losing a world for the first time in 61 years. And the branch is answering. Something's coming. Big. 40 hours out. Maybe less." For a moment the bridge was quiet. Then Orrin Halvey smiled. And it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who has been hunting a thing for a very long time, and has just heard it admit, out loud, where it lives. 61 years, he said softly, and the first time it ever asks for help is because of an 11-year-old who forgot her lines. He looked at the blue world turning below the gray ship. "Sawyer, log it. The murmur just told us it's afraid of her, and it just told us where the rest of it is hiding. Both of those are the best news we've had all year. 40 hours, Captain. Whatever's coming, it's coming for this world, and for that child specifically. Then we've got 40 hours to wake up 400 million people and finish what a little girl started," Halvey said. "Get me the surface again, all of it. It's time the whole world heard about the friend it didn't know it had." For the next 40 hours, the warship Long Quiet did the slowest, most patient kind of war there is. It did not fire. It hung above the harbor at 4 kilometers, gray and enormous and silent, and it pushed the low harmonic down over the world in long, slow waves, one region at a time, never hard enough to harm, just hard enough to make the murmur spend. And in each region, for a few minutes at a time, the seeds in the Elu skulls went quiet, and people woke up, and the old, tired human voice was there waiting for them when they did. Nima learned what Halvey was doing, and she helped him do it, because it turned out the humans needed her. They needed her because she was the proof. A grown Elu, woken for 3 minutes by the harmonic, and then dropped back into the braid, could be told by the murmur that the silence had been an attack, a wound, a thing the enemy did to hurt them. But Nima had been awake the whole time. Nima had been off the braid for 40 hours and counting, walking around the central island in the open, eating, sleeping, laughing once, crying twice, entirely herself, and not dying, and not even suffering. And that was a thing the murmur could not explain away, because there she was, the awake child, alive and well in the middle of the square. So Halvey put her voice on the channel next to his. "Tell them what it's like," he said to her, the first time, his tired voice coming down soft and private into the little crystal he'd had a drone lower to her. A human crystal this time, one that only listened and never pushed. "Not what I tell them, what you know. You're the only one who's lived it." In one of the quiet hours, while the harmonic worked its slow way across a far hemisphere, and there was nothing for Nima to do but wait, she asked the tired old voice a question of her own. She asked it why the humans had come, not how, not what they were, but why. Why would a ship cross so much dark to free a world it had never met, a world of strangers, a world that screamed at it and sang at it and tried to make it not exist? The voice was quiet for a while before it answered, and when it answered, it was even more tired than usual, and Nima understood, young as she was, that she had touched something old and sore. "There was a world of ours," Halvey said, "a long way from here, 90,000 people. The murmur came to it the way it came to you, soft, as a gift. End of loneliness, never afraid again. And our people said yes, the way yours did. Because the offer is a good offer if you don't know what it costs. And by the time anyone understood what it really was, the world had gone gold and silent, and a ship came, and the ship came too late." A pause. "I was on that ship, little speaker. I was young. I stood on a bridge and watched a readout go dark, 90,000 of ours, and there was nothing the ship could do but turn around and carry the news home. We were too late by a season. maybe less. And I decided, standing there, that I would never again be too late to a world the murmur was eating. I've spent my whole life keeping that promise. The long quiet is the third ship I've made into a thing that gets there in time. Your world is the 19th we've reached early enough to save. His voice did not break, but it came close. So that's why we came. We came because once we didn't, and 90,000 people paid for it. And the only thing I know to do with that is to never let it happen to anyone else while I'm still breathing. That's the whole reason. There's no grander one. There never is. Nima did not have words for what she felt, hearing that. She was 11, but she understood, in the way children understand the important things before they have the words for them, that the gray ship in her sky was not a god, and was not a conqueror, and was not even, really, a warship, not in the way her people had been taught to fear warships. It was an old man's grief, made into iron, pointed forever at the thing that had caused it, and she thought that there were worse things in the universe to be saved by. It frightened her, the first time, more than the crowd had frightened her, more than the ship in the sky, to speak to 400 million people, to know that her own small voice would land in every street, and every window, and every floating temple at once, the way the choir's voice had landed her whole life. She had never wanted to be the speaker the way the choir made her be the speaker, hollow, a clean channel for words that were not hers. But Halvey did not ask her to be that. He asked her for the opposite. He asked her to be as much herself as she could possibly be, and to let the world hear exactly what one real Elu sounded like, because the world had not heard a real Elu in 61 years, and had forgotten the sound. So Nima Sadel, 11 seasons old, spoke to 400 million of her own people, and she did not speak the choir's smooth words, and she did not speak the human captain's plain hard words. She spoke her own. It's quiet, she told the world. That's the first thing. It's so quiet you'll think you've gone wrong. The choir's been in your head since you were 6, and now it isn't, and the quiet feels like falling. I know. I felt it too. But you don't fall. You just keep standing there, in the quiet, and after a little while, you notice the quiet isn't empty. It's full of you. All the you that the choir was sitting on top of. Your own thoughts, your own scared, your own happy. Things you forgot were yours because you haven't felt them alone since you were small. The choir told us being alone was the worst thing. It lied. Being alone with yourself isn't the worst thing. It's just the door. And on the other side of the door is everybody else. The real way, where you choose them instead of being made to. Across the world, in the few-minute windows when the harmonic held a region quiet, people heard a child say that, in her own voice, and some of them, hearing it, did not go back to sleep when the seed woke up. They held on, the way she had held on, by remembering one true thing too hard to let go of. The waking spread. It spread the way a single lit candle spreads in a dark hall, not by force, by being seen. By the end of the first day, the central island was free. 412,000 people on it, walking around inside their own heads, terrified and amazed, learning to be Adelu, instead of being choir. By the end of the second day, the harbor cities had cracked, and the floating temples, and the long farms of the eastern ridge. The murmur fought every step. It threw fear, it threw cold, it turned the still sleeping against the newly woken, it begged and screamed and lied. But it was, for the first time in 61 years, losing ground, and ground lost to waking does not come back, because you cannot unnotice that you are a person. On the bridge, Sawyer watched the readout change hour by hour, and she had never seen anything like it, and she had been doing this work for 11 years. She had seen worlds freed before. It was always slow, always hard, always partial. But she had never seen a world free this fast, and she said as much to the captain, and Halvey nodded as if he had expected it. It's the child, he said. Every world we free one mind first and the rest follow. But the first mind is usually a grown one, scarred, careful, slow to trust what it's feeling. They wake up and they spend a week not believing it. This one's 11. She woke up and she just believed it. The way children believe things. All the way, no holding back. And now she's standing in the middle of the world, saying it out loud in her own voice, and the others can hear that she isn't pretending. And children are the hardest thing in the universe to lie to, and the easiest thing in the universe to be honest in front of. He watched the gold readout thinning, region by region. The murmur built itself to beat fear. It's very good at fear. It never built itself to beat a child telling the simple truth, because it never imagined a child would get the chance. It'll learn, Sawyer said. Maybe, but not here, not in time. Halvey almost smiled. It made a mistake here. It told a frightened crowd to silence the one awake child, and the silencing showed 400 people the quiet, and the quiet made 40,000 more. It dug its own crack trying to close one. That's the thing about a lie that's run too long, Sawyer. Every move it makes to save itself is made of more lie, and the lie is the very thing waking everyone up. And the whole time, the relay's answer came closer. Sawyer counted it down on the bridge. 30 hours, 20, 12. And then, at 6 hours out, the thing the murmur had called for finally showed itself on the long scopes. And even Sawyer, who had seen a great deal, sat back in her chair. "Captain," she said, "it's a fleet." Halvey came to look. The scope showed it climbing out of the dark between stars, a wide, loose formation of ships. And they were not human ships, and they were not Elu ships. They were something else, something the murmur had grown for itself across the worlds it had used up. They were pale, and smooth, and wrong, ships with no clean edges, ships that looked grown rather than built, and there were a great many of them. "Count," Halvey said. 1,240 hulls, sir. Reading them now. They're crude, but the crews are—" Sawyer stopped. "The crews are taken, Captain. Every one. These are the people of the silent worlds. The 32 it used up. It didn't kill them all. It kept the bodies, put them on ships, made them a fleet. 1,240 ships crewed by the dead worlds, coming to take this one back." It was a horror, and Nima, who was listening from the surface, felt the horror of it all the way down in the cold of her stomach. 1,240 ships, full of people the murmur had hollowed out and kept, coming to make her world like theirs. Against one ship, against the gray ship in the sky, and the old tired man inside it. She thought for one terrible moment that they had lost. 1,240 against one. Even a child can count. She found the human crystal that only listened, the little one the drone had lowered to her, and she spoke into it, and her voice was small and frightened. "Captain Halvey, there are too many. 1,200. You only have one ship. You should go. You woke us up. You did the thing. You should go before they get here. You don't have to stay. Please. You've already given us." The tired old voice came back, and it was not angry, and it was not afraid, and it did not even seem to think the question was strange. "Little speaker," it said, "I'm going to tell you the one thing about us that the thing in your sky never learned, because it's the thing that's about to cost it everything it stole." A pause. "It thinks the number of ships is what matters. It's always thought that. It eats worlds and grows fleets and counts hulls, because to a thing made of many minds pretending to be one, more is the only kind of strong it understands. But we don't measure it the way it does. We never have. There is a number that matters more than 1,240, and the number is 1. And the 1 is the ship that decides to stand in the way and does not move. Now do something for me. Stop counting their ships. Look at mine. And don't lower your eyes." But she had forgotten, because she was 11 and had only known the humans for 2 days, the one thing about them that the murmur, in 61 years of eating worlds, had never had to learn. The long quiet had been waiting for this. Oren Halvey looked at the 1,240 hulls climbing toward his world and his ship, and he did not look afraid, and he did not look surprised. And Nima, watching his face on the channel feed, finally understood what the not afraid had been the whole time. It was not bravery, it was readiness. The old man had known, from the first hour, that waking a world would make the murmur call for everything it had, and he had wanted it to. Because a thing spread across 40 worlds is hard to kill, but a thing that gathers itself into one fleet to defend one world is a thing that has, for the first and only time, put itself all in one place. "There it all is," Halvey said quietly. 61 years of stolen people, everybody it ever kept, all in one formation, because of a little girl who stopped talking. It came out of hiding, to save the world it's losing. It should have just let this one go. He straightened. "Sawyer, we've spent 2 days being gentle. Tell the deck the gentle part is over." The long quiet moved for the first time in 2 days. It did not flee the 1,240 ships, and it did not hold position to be surrounded by them. It rose, slow and vast and certain, up and out from the blue world, putting itself squarely between the planet and the incoming fleet, 9 kilometers of human warship, turning its scarred gray flank to the enemy, and lighting, one by one, the hundreds of dark square openings that ran the length of it. Nima stood in the square on the central island with her mother's hand in hers, her mother awake now and staying awake, and she looked up and watched the gray ship climb to meet 1,240, and she was afraid for it, the way you are afraid for someone you have only just learned to love. The old voice came down to the whole waking world one more time, and to her, and it was still tired, and it was still patient, and now there was iron under it. People of the third world, Oren Halvey said, in a few minutes, you're going to see a thing happen in your sky, and I want you to understand what it is, because the thing in your heads is going to try to tell you it's a tragedy. It's going to tell you those 1,200 ships are your friends, your family, the lost worlds coming home, and that the human is about to murder them. So I'll tell you the truth first, the way I have from the start. Those ships are full of people who are already gone. The murmur ate them a long time ago, and kept the bodies for this. There is no one left in those hulls to save. There is only the thing that hollowed them, wearing them, coming to do the same to you. We are not going to let it. A pause, and then the iron all the way through. You woke up. We came a very long way to make sure you got to stay awake. Watch your sky, and do not lower your eyes, and when it's over, you will still be yourselves. That is the only promise I have ever made to a world, and the long quiet has never once failed to keep it. The 1,240 came on, and the long quiet, between them and the child, opened fire. Nima had never seen a real weapon fire. Her people had not made war in living memory. The choir did not need war. It took worlds by whispering, not by burning, and so the Athulu had forgotten what it looked like when something decided to stop a thing the hard way. Nima stood in the square with her mother's hand crushing hers, and 400,000 newly woken people around her, all of them looking up, and she saw the human warship show her people what their world had been protected from this whole time without ever knowing. The dark square openings along the flank of the long quiet lit white. There was no sound at first, because sound is slow and the distance was great, and so for one long strange moment, the war happened in silence over the harbor. The white light leapt out from the gray ship in straight clean lines, hundreds of them at once, faster than Nima's eyes could follow, and where each line touched a pale-grown hull of the Murmur's fleet, the hull simply came apart. Not exploded. Came apart, the way a thing comes apart when the force holding it together is taken away all at once, scattering into a bright, expanding bloom, and then into nothing. Then the sound arrived, rolling down 4 kilometers of air, and it was not the roar Nima had braced for. It was a deep, continuous tearing, the sound of a great machine working without rest, patient and total. And it went on, and did not stop. 1,240 ships had come for her world. The first 100 were gone in the first 9 seconds. Up on the bridge, Petra Sawyer read the battle out in a flat, steady voice, the way she had been trained to, even as the numbers fell faster than she could believe. The Murmur's fleet was vast, and it was crewed by stolen hands, but it had been grown to terrify the unarmed, to descend on worlds that had already surrendered, and it had never in its long life met a thing built for exactly this moment, by people who had survived meeting it once before. The pale ships had no answer to the long quiet. Their weapons were slow and soft. Their hulls were grown, not forged. They came on in their wide, loose formation, 1,240 strong, and the human warship stood between them and the child, and took them apart in the order they arrived. 200 down, Sawyer said. 300. They're still closing, sir. They're not breaking off. The Murmur won't let them break off. It can't afford to, Halvey said. He stood with his hands folded behind his back, watching the great tearing work of his own ship, with no joy in his face, and no doubt in it either. If it loses this fleet, it loses everything it's carried, for 61 years, every body, every world. It has to win here, or it's finished. So it'll spend all 1,240. Good, let it. Hold the line. Nothing gets past us to the planet. Nothing. Nothing got past. The pale ships tried. As their numbers fell, they spread. trying to flow around the gray warship the way water flows around a stone, to slip past it and reach the world and the 400 million half-woken minds that were the whole prize. And the long quiet, 9 kilometers long, moved to meet every one of them, turning, climbing, falling, putting its scarred hull between the planet and every single hull that tried to pass, and not one got through. Down on the surface, Nima watched the human ship dance, vast and impossibly quick for its size, a mountain that moved like a hunting thing, always between, and she understood that this was what it had meant by, "We are not going anywhere." It did not just mean it would stay. It meant it would stand in the way of everything, forever, so that nothing reached the people behind it. A great fear moved through the crowd in the square, and Nima felt it move through her too, because the pale ships were close enough now to be seen as ships, smooth and wrong and many, and a thing that has been afraid of a voice in its head for 61 years does not lose all its fear in 2 days. Somewhere near her, a man cried out that they should run, that they should hide in the deep cellars under the speaking house, that the human had brought this down on them, that they had been safe under the choir, and now the sky was full of war. The old fear, reaching for the old comfort. And the man might have started a panic. 400,000 newly woken people are a fragile thing, except that a woman near him, the harbor keeper's wife, took his arm and said, in her own plain Aulu voice, not the choir's, "No, look, count them yourself. Look how many of them there were when they came over the ridge, and look how many there are now. The human isn't losing, the human is winning, and it's winning in front of us, and it told us to keep our eyes open, so keep them open." And the man looked, and counted, and went quiet, because she was right. And the thing about being awake is that you can check a thing for yourself, and the count was plain in the sky for anyone with the courage to make it. The crowd kept its eyes open. 400,000 people, 2 days off the braid, stood in the square under a sky on fire, and did the bravest thing they had ever done as free people, which was to simply watch, and trust the count of their own eyes, and not lower them. 600 down, Sawyer said. 700. "Sir, the back third of their formation is slowing. The crews are slowing. The murmur's losing grip on them. It's spending so much holding this world's seeds down that it can't drive the far ships hard anymore." "Then this is the moment," Halvey said. "Sawyer, the harmonic. Full strength, not at the planet, at the fleet." Sawyer turned. "Sir, those crews are gone. You said it yourself. There's no one left in them to wake." "I said the murmur ate them. I didn't say there was nothing left. Every mind it ever took, it kept. It's the only way it could wear them. Which means under the thing wearing them, there are 400,000 people who have been screaming inside their own skulls for 61 years, used as hands, used as ships, and never once let go." The old man's voice did not rise, but something moved in it that had not moved the whole story. "We can't save their bodies. Those are too far gone. But for 9 seconds, before the end, we can take the murmur's hand off their minds and let them be themselves. Let them know a thing finally came. Let them not die wearing it. Push the harmonic, Sawyer. That's an order, and it's the last kindness anyone's done those people in 61 years. The long quiet, still firing, still standing between the child and the fleet, sang its low harmonic out across the dying ships at full strength. What happened then, Nima could not see from the ground, and the humans only knew it from the readout, but Sawyer wrote it into the record, and Nima read it later, and wept over it for a long time. For 9 seconds, across the back 2/3 of the Murmur's fleet, the braid let go. 400,000 stolen minds, the hollowed crews of 32 dead worlds, came awake all at once for the first time since their worlds fell. They did not have long. Their ships were already broken, or breaking. But for 9 seconds, they were themselves, and the readout showed it. 400,000 candles flaring up bright and clear and free in the dark of the falling fleet. And then, as the ships came apart, going out, one by one, not as parts of a thing, but as people, free people, people who got, at the very end, to be no one's hand. "They're gone, sir," Sawyer said quietly, and there were tears on her face, and she did not wipe them. All of them, free, and gone. 900 down, Halvey said, because the war was not over, and the captain does not stop while the line still needs holding. How many left? 340, sir. The front. The ones the murmurs still driving hard. They're the closest to the planet. Then those are the only ones left that matter, Halvey said. Finish it. The long quiet finished it. Nima watched the last of it from the square, and she would remember it her whole life, and she would tell it to her own children, and they to theirs, the day the gray ship stood in the sky, and the false fleet broke against it, like waves against a cliff that does not move. The last 340 pale hulls came on hard, driven by a thing that knew it was dying, and would rather take the world down with it, and the human warship met them in the high air over the harbor, close enough now that the people on the ground could see the white lines leap, and the pale ships bloom and vanish. 300, 200, 100. The great tearing sound rolling down over a silent waking world that watched its sky, and, because an old man had told them to, did not lower its eyes. The last ship of the Murmur's fleet came apart 11 kilometers above the central island. And then the sky was empty, except for the gray warship, hanging where it had hung for 2 days, scarred and silent and entirely whole, between the people and the dark. It had not taken a single hit. Nima found that out later too, and it did not surprise her, because by then she understood what the long quiet was. It was not a ship that might fail. It had never once, in 19 years under Orrin Halvey, failed to keep the only promise it made. It was the thing that stood in the way. That was all it was, and all it had ever needed to be. For a moment, the whole world was silent in a new way. Then the choir died. Nima felt it go. Everyone felt it go. All 400 million, the woken and the still sleeping alike, because the thing in the sky that had been the Murmur's fleet had also been the Murmur's last strength on this world, the reserve it had been holding behind the braid, and when the fleet was gone, there was nothing left to hold the seeds down. The smooth, folded voice in 400 million skulls, the voice that had sung Nima to sleep every night of her life, the voice that had told her there was nothing in the sky, rose one last time into a scream, and the scream thinned, and cracked, and came apart, the way the pale ships had come apart, all at once, the force holding it together simply gone. And then it was quiet. It was quiet across a whole world at the same time. 400 million Elu stood wherever they were standing, in squares and streets and floating temples and long farms, and for the first time in 61 years, every one of them was alone inside their own head. The quiet rolled over the planet like a tide going out, and Nima, standing in the square with her mother's hand in hers, felt it reach her, the great final silence, and she understood that this was the moment the whole world fell through the door she had told them about. 400 million people, falling, all at once, into the quiet that feels like falling. She did the only thing she knew to do. She had been through the door first. She knew the way. She squeezed her mother's hand, and she said, in her own small voice, into the enormous new silence of her world, "It's all right. It's just the quiet. Stay in it. It's full of you." And around her, slowly, the 400,000 people of the central island began to find out that she was right. It was not easy. Nima would never pretend it was easy. Not then, and not in all the years after. 61 years is a long time to be held, and a world does not wake up gently from a sleep that deep. There was fear, in those first hours and days, more fear than Nima had words for, a whole planet learning at once how to carry its own feelings without a voice to take them away. There was grief, terrible grief, as people understood what had been done to them, and to the 32 worlds before them, and to the 400,000 who had died free in the sky for 9 seconds and no longer. There was anger, and there was confusion, and there were many who, for a while, wished the choir back, because being held is easier than being free, and a thing does not stop being a comfort, just because it was also a chain. But there was Nima, the child who stopped talking, the one who had been awake the longest, who had gone through the door first, and come back to hold it open for everyone else. Wherever the new fear was worst, they brought her, and she sat with people in the quiet, and told them the truth in her own voice, that the quiet was not empty, that being alone with yourself was only the door, that on the other side of it was everybody else, the real way, the chosen way. And slowly, person by person, square by square, the world stayed awake. The humans helped her, but they helped her in a particular way that Nima did not fully understand until she was much older. They never took over. They could have. They had a 9-kilometer warship and tools that must have seemed like magic to a people who flew round humming boats, and they could have descended on the AG world and organized it and run it and fixed it the way you fix a broken machine. Other powers in the dark would have. The Oilu would learn, later, in the long history the humans gave them, that there were powers in the galaxy who freed worlds only to own them, who broke one chain and fastened another, and called it rescue. The humans of the Long Quiet did not do that. They stood back. They answered questions when questions were asked, and stayed silent when they were not. They taught, but only what the Alu wanted to learn, and when an Alu, frightened and grieving and longing for the old warm voice, asked a human to please just tell them what to do, the human would always say the same thing, gently, in the heavy accent that turned the soft sounds hard. That the whole point, the entire reason any of this had happened, was so that no one would ever tell the Hilu what to do again, and that the fear of choosing was the last thing the murmur had left in them, and that it would pass, and that they should sit in the quiet a while longer and find out what they themselves wanted. It was a hard kindness. It was the hardest kindness there is, but it was the only one that left a world standing on its own feet when the helpers finally went home. The Long Quiet did not leave. Nima had thought it would. She had thought, once the fleet was broken and the choir was dead, the gray ship would simply not be there one morning, the way it had simply been there that first morning, but it stayed. It hung above the harbor at 4 kilometers, scarred and patient, for 40 more days, while the humans came down in small quiet craft and helped where help could be taken and stood back where it could not. They brought the records, the whole long story written down, so the Aliu would always know exactly what had happened and never be told otherwise. They showed the Aliu how to take the crystal seeds out, gently, from those who wanted them out, and how to live with them dark and silent in those who were too afraid yet to remove them. They did not push. After 2 days of being the loudest thing in the sky, the humans became, deliberately, the quietest, because they understood, in a way the murmur never had, that a free mind cannot be given freedom. It can only be guarded while it learns to stand. On the last day, the tired old voice asked to speak to the child who had stopped talking, and Nima was brought up to the gray ship for the first and only time, in a small human craft, her mother's hand in hers the whole way. Oren Halvey was older up close than his voice had been. He was 68 years old, and he looked every year of it and more, and he met the 11-season-old child on the wide quiet deck of his warship, and did not speak down to her the way grown ones did. "You stopped talking," he said. "Out of 400 million, you were the one who stopped. Do you know why it was you?" Nima thought about it, the way she thought about everything now, carefully, in her own quiet. "Because I was saying words that weren't mine," she said at last. "I'd practiced them so much I knew exactly how they were supposed to sound. So when the sky changed and I lost my place, I noticed the words were gone, and once I noticed the words were gone, I noticed I was the one who'd had them, and once I noticed I was there at all." She shrugged, a small Alu child on a vast human deck. "I couldn't stop being there after that." Halvey looked at her a long moment, and then he did a thing she did not expect. He nodded, slowly. The way you nod at someone you have decided is the same kind of thing you are. "That's the whole secret," he said. "Every world it takes by making everyone forget they're a person, separate from the song. And every world that's ever been freed, anywhere, was freed because one person inside remembered they were a person, and couldn't unsee it, and held on while the rest woke up. It's never the ship that frees a world, little speaker. The ship just stands in the way and buys the time. The world frees itself, one mind first." He almost smiled. "We came a very long way hoping there'd be one of you. There's always one. We just have to get there before it's finished, and stand in the way long enough for the one to wake the rest." "Will it come back?" Nima asked. The murmur. "The rest of it. You said this world was only a leaf." "It'll come back," Halvey said, and he did not lie to her, because he had not lied to her people once. "Not soon. We hurt it badly here, and we know where its branches are now, because it told us when it was scared. We're going to go find them, one at a time, the way we found you. But it's old and it's patient, and it's spread across a lot of dark, and the truth is, your grandchildren may still be doing this work." He looked down at her. "So I'll tell you what I told your world. Don't lower your eyes. Teach the next ones what the quiet is, so that if it ever whispers to a child here again, the child already knows the door and walks through it on her own and doesn't even need a ship in the sky. That's how a world stays free. Not because we stand guard forever, because you learn to be the one who stops talking. The long quiet left the next morning. It did not vanish the way it had arrived. Nima stood in the square and watched it go, slow and gray and enormous, climbing up out of the blue sky it had guarded for 42 days, until it was a bright point, and then a fainter point, and then the empty sky her people had always had, except that now they knew it was theirs. Before the ship was gone from the sky, before it was even a fainter point, Nima did one last thing, and it was a small thing, and no one made her do it, which was the entire point. She stood in the square that the humans had guarded, with her mother's hand in hers, and the quiet of her own free head all around her, and she finished the sentence. She had stopped it 42 days before, on the white step, with the sky changing above her, the choir's sentence, the one that was not hers. And so the choir asks every house to lower its eyes, to quiet its thoughts, to give up the small noise of the self, so that we may all be one mind under the steb. She had never said the last word. The thing in the sky had never let her, and then the thing in her head had never let her, and then she had not wanted to. But now, with the gray ship climbing free into a sky that was hers, she said the sentence again, out loud, in her own small voice, and she changed it, because a free mind can change a sentence, and she ended it the way she chose. And so we ask every house, she said, to no one, to herself, to the quiet, to lift its eyes, and keep its own thoughts, and make the small noise of the self as loud as it likes, so that we may all be ourselves, together, by choosing it. Then she let her breath out, and the sentence was finished, and it was hers, and the word that ended it was a word the choir had never once allowed in 61 years, and the word was, ourselves. She was an old woman, before she understood everything that had happened in those 42 days, and by then, she had spent a whole long life teaching Alu children what the quiet was, so that the door would always be open and always be known. She buried her mother awake and free, and her mother's last words were her own, in her own cracked voice, which Nima counted the greatest wealth a person could leave behind. She watched her world learn, slowly, painfully, completely, how to be 400 million people who chose each other, instead of being made one. And every season, on the day the sky had changed, the Abalu gathered in the square on the central island, and they did a strange and beautiful thing that no other world did. They stood together, and for one full minute, they were each entirely silent and entirely alone inside their own heads. 400 million people in the same place, choosing, together, to be themselves. Nima led it every year, until she could not. And then a child she had taught led it, and a child that child taught after that. And every year, when the minute of quiet ended, and the world let out its breath and turned to one another, free, awake, alone together, the oldest among them would look up at the empty sky where a gray ship had once hung silent and unmoving between their world and the dark, and they would remember the tired old voice that had told them the truth, at the same volume as the lie, and they would remember that it had never once failed to keep the only promise it ever made. And somewhere out in all that dark, the warship Long Quiet was still going, branch by branch, world by world, standing in the way, waiting each time for the one mind that would stop mid-sentence and notice the sky had changed. There was always one. There always is.